Gone are the days of being two tiers of tight ends. Travis Kelce, and then Mark Andrews, George Kittle, and whoever else was hot that previous year. Like Bob Dylan said, the times they are changing. We have rookies performing, vets are retiring, human sacrifice, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. And if you want to be prepared for your drafts, you must understand these changes. Well, we're here to help tonight on the Rod Pod. It's time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, J.J. Wenner, and this is a live version of the Rider Dynasty podcast. With me are my co-hosts, Jameson Hutchinson and Joe Harlow. Joe, what are your overarching thoughts on the tight end position this year?
You know, I think the tight end position this year is almost as exciting and exhilarating as the intro you've put in for us. Again, like you said, gone are the days of Travis Kelce, a couple other guys, and then a bunch of meh. We have a legitimate 2.5, 3 tiers deep of players here. It's a real position again. Still not as deep as the other positions, but you can wait to take the 10th tight end and be okay in your leagues.
You know, over the years, what I've noticed is that tight ends go in dynasties. Like you have one guy who sort of dominates for a long stretch of time. Jameson, for you, when you first started playing fantasy, who is that first tight end who dominated into the fantasy landscape?
For me, it was around 2005. So we're talking Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez when he was a Chief. And, you know, some of the other guys, you know, Algie Crumpler, Todd Heap, you know, Heath Miller before, you know, just all those guys. So, and back then, you know, if you didn't have the top guy, you were hoping for a touchdown. And if they didn't, that was it. It's much different, obviously, in today's landscape, but just a fun blast in the past for all those guys.
Yeah, Antonio Gates was the guy for me. I started around the same time you did, a little over 20 years ago. And Antonio Gates, man, if you could get him, it was like having another wide receiver on the field. He was amazing for that stretch of time. Now, before we move on to the show, let's get in a word from our sponsors. Our comprehensive 2024 IDB Plus Rookie Guide is here. Get the Rookie Draft Guide for a limited time only for $9.99. The latest version includes all of the post-draft feedback you need to dominate your drafts. So check out the link in the show description and download your copy today. Now, gentlemen, before we start, what are you looking for in a tight end? Joe?
Honestly, this is going to be a weird answer, but the thing I'm looking for most, especially I'm not going to talk about the elite guys because, you know, but I want someone who is a competent blocker, honestly. Someone who's going to be able to stay on the field. Like in today's day and age where the running backs still don't super matter to the league, but the run game is massive. You need a tight end who can make some plays as a blocker. Need someone who can stay on the field, keep on the field, and need some snap counts. It's great if you have a player who is a good receiver, but if they can't block, they're going to have a 50% snap share, and then you're really screwed for volume. You need that touchdown. So for the not top guys, that's what I want. The top guys, it's even better. That's why what helped George Kittle break out a couple years ago, because he was a dominant blocker.
Well, the Gronk calling card. Jameson, Is there anything else you look for?
I'm always looking to see where they are on the receiver depth chart. Obviously, if you can block, you'll be on, you know, the more times you're on the field, the more opportunity you'll have. But, you know, guys like Travis Kelce, he's basically the wide receiver one for Patrick Mahomes compared to, you know, let's say George Kittle, where you've got Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and it kind of any given week, it just makes it a little more harder. So usually top two as far as receiving weapons go, even if you're tight end, I think that's something I'm always looking, just like anything else, just like running back or wide receiver, volume's king.
All right, Mace jumping on to say hi. What's going on, buddy? Hope you're doing well, sir. Well, let's jump right into tier one then. We have tier one, two players, 3 years of experience, Sam Laporta and Trey McBride. Jameson, do both of these guys belong in tier 1?
I would say so. Sam Laporta, I think, especially for him last year, he had 10 touchdowns. I think we are getting him at his ceiling. Unless something were to happen to Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that. But just, 10 touchdowns, the touchdown variance can kind of go. But, I mean, he had, I believe it was close to 900 yards last year. Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, both cooked last year. And then Trey McBride, I know that Marvin Harrison Jr. is coming into the fold. But, the second half of the year, especially with Kyler Murray coming back, I thought that they really did a lot of good stuff. And I think he still could end up having a huge year this year.
And he still fits what you were saying, being that second wide, like the second receiving target.
Yep, absolutely.
Joe, what are your thoughts on tier 1?
I tend to be a little lower on both these players than consensus, but I still think they're locked in as tier 1.
Okay.
Youth have shown a lot. But...
All right. So we're both good with who is in tier 1. Let's take a look at tier 2. And see who we are going to add to this list. So, tier 2, according to Dynasty Pros, is Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Brock Bowers, TJ Hawkinson, and Travis Kelce. Now, I see a couple that I might move up, but I want to know what you think. Jameson, anybody from tier 2 who you think needs to be in tier 1?
I'm going to start off right at the top with Mark Andrews. I think he's the top dog for the Baltimore Ravens offense. Todd Monken in his second year, I think, he obviously was injured last year, but I don't think Zay Flowers is really going to overtake Mark Andrews if they're both on the field as far as, being that number 1 guy for Lamar. So Mark Andrews would be an immediate tier 1 guy for me. 28, a little older, but he's still got plenty of years ahead of him.
Joe, are you on board with the Mark Andrews to tier 1?
No, I am not. I am not a Mark Andrews fan at all. If he could catch, I would be more in on him, but with age, injury histories, the dude spikes so many passes. I'm not a Mark Andrews fan.
Okay. Well, I have to say, if it's coming down now to me, choosing between the two of you, I seldom do this, but I'm going to agree with Jameson. I know I have a history, Jameson, of ruling against you, but
yes,
I love Mark Andrews and what he can do in that offense. They didn't really add any wide receiver help. I mean, it's still Bateman and Aguilar.
Yep.
So don't forget Tez Walker.
There we go.
Oh, already did. I already did. All right. Well, Joe, is there anybody you think should move up?
I have Dalton Kincaid for the Bills moving up.
Okay.
He is actually my tight end 1 for Dynasty. Someone I was lower on in the pre-draft process as a rookie, but honestly, at this time, he's with Josh Allen, and he's the clear best receiving option on the team. I don't think it's particularly close unless Keon Coleman just absolutely lights the world on fire. But the top option for one of the best quarterbacks in the league, yes, please.
Jameson, Dalton Kincaid?
Well, I'm going to disagree and keep him in tier 2. Last year, even Stephon Diggs, when he fell off the second half of the year, Dalton Kincaid was still not on the field 100%. If he gets incorporated, I know that Stephon Diggs is gone. They've got a lot of, musical chairs at the wide receiver position, but they had the coordinator change with Joe Brady coming in. And, when Dawson Knox got hurt between weeks 8 and 12, he did all right. But the end of the year, outside of week 17, 18, he did really good, over 80 yards. But week 15, 0 yards. Week 16, 7 yards. Week 14, 21. If he would be a full-time player, which I assume he will be, and I kind of see it, I would move him into tier 1, but it's just hard for me too.
All right. Well, you guys are disagreeing a lot. I like that. I appreciate that, but it makes it difficult on me. I am not the biggest Dalton Kincaid fan. I don't like the Bills in general. Sorry, Buffalo fans. It's because I love the Jets. I'm sorry. But, I mean, who else are they going to throw to? I have to think Dalton Kincaid is going to get peppered with targets. So I'm moving him up. I'm going with Joe Harlow. Sorry, Joe. Sorry, Jameson.
I will say this: if you're playing full PPR, I think Dalton Kincaid's a great pickup. I think that actually does change a lot of stuff because he was getting like 6-7 catches, but he'd have 20 yards. I think one of the games he had 6 catches for 20 yards. So 6 points. It totally flip flops. So as far as full PPR, I do think that matters a little bit. And obviously with Stephon Diggs gone, I do think there's a path for him to tier 1. It's not my favorite, obviously.
All right. Well, Jameson, who else in tier 2 do you think should be considered for tier 1?
Like I've talked about the last couple weeks, when I played Dynasty, I play in more of a 2-year window. And I think Travis Kelce will be around for 2 years, so I'm going to put him back into tier 1.
Okay. Joe?
That's a tough one. I feel like, he's got to be tier 1.
That is not a ringing endorsement. You didn't say that with a lot of energy.
He's one of the best of all time, best quarterback in the league.
But are we sure he's going to play 2 years? Or does it matter?
I don't think it matters, really. I think his floor of a top 5 tight end. I think for this position,
All right. Travis Kelce slides on over, leaving 3 players left in tier 2. Are we just going to empty it out, guys? We have Pitts, Bowers, and Hockenson. Are we okay with them staying where they are? Joe?
I think you could make a legitimate argument for all of them to move up, but these 3 have a lot more question marks than the others, so I think we can leave them all in tier 2.
Jameson?
If TJ Hockenson didn't have a new quarterback that we haven't seen yet, I think he's a great buy low in Dynasty right now. I know that's not necessarily what we're talking about, but he is an absolute gangster when he's on the field. So I love Hockenson. I thought he was really good last year before he got hurt really late in the year. And then the other 2 guys I'm just a little bit lower on. So I think the tier 2 kind of stays as is.
All right. Well, that leaves us with a current tier 2 of Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, and TJ Hockenson. Let's take a look at tier 3. And
before we move to tier 3, just want to say I think there's a real world where in 6 months we just completely flip tiers 2 and 1 from this. I think there's a real world where that happens.
Yep.
Yes. 100% I agree with you. I think if I was doing this, I would consider Pitts for tier 1. I know his usage was horrible last year. He had a great rookie year. And man, Hockenson did look good in Minnesota, and he's only 26.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand with his injury, let's see what he comes back as. Let's see if Kyle Pitts gets a target share with the new coaching staff. And let's see if Brock Bowers is everything that he is talked up to be. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
All right.
If he had any other quarterback besides Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, I think I would move the discussion up. But
Absolutely.
I cannot do it. I just cannot.
I'll definitely say I think in a startup, I'm waiting for these tier 2 guys over the tier 1 players. I think there's just an upside shot.
I think that's fair. I know we are both in the 3 of us are all in a redraft league. And I know TJ Hockenson dropped quite a while before anybody was willing to take him. But I think that's more in redraft because of his late occurring injury. All right. So looking at tier 3 now, we have George Kittle, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Ben Sinnott, and Dalton Schultz. I'm assuming nobody from tier 2 is moving down to tier 3. So Jameson, is anybody in tier 3 moving up to tier 2 for you?
I think this is hard for some people, but tied into last year, George Kittle. I'm almost to the point where we see this tier, and I think we'll move a lot of guys to tier 4. I would almost make the case to make a tier in between 2 and 3 for some of these guys. But I think, if anything, George Kittle, outside of Travis Kelce, has got the highest ceiling out of all these tight ends. I mean, when he hits, he I mean, he's just absolute explosive. We talk about the Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel. If one of those guys are gone, we've seen the splits when George Kittle is playing without one of them, and he ends up, not blocking. He ends up as another wide receiver. So I can't quit George Kittle. I know he's got some down weeks, but he's always going to be one of my guys.
All right, so George Kittle, nominated to move up a tier. Joe, where are you with Kittle?
I would keep him in tier 3. Just the age, all the injuries, and all the mouths to feed. I understand. I will say in like a best ball league, I think you could argue him tier 1, to be totally honest. But for a normal league, so much volatility.
It's hard because when I was writing down what I look for in a tight end, right? Quarterback doesn't really matter to me, but running back, I don't want a major receiving option. And what Jameson said, I don't want 3 solid wide receivers. I don't want 2 solid wide receivers.
Yeah.
And Kittle kind of falls into that territory where he has all of that, right? He has great receiving options at running back. He has solid wide receivers ahead of him. It makes it hard to confidently put him into your starting lineup week after week. All right. So I'm going to leave Kittle where he is, although I do agree his upside is easily tier 1. Joe, anybody else in this tier?
Couple names I would consider, but overall, I think this tier is pretty set. I don't think anyone else was really the same level of talent as Pitts, Bowers, or Hawk.
So you're almost in agreement with Jameson that we need like another tier, like 2.5?
Yeah.
Well, there are no rules here, gentlemen.
All right.
So we now have a tier 2.5.
Okay.
So Kittle would go there?
Yes.
Okay. Who else? Any other nominations?
I would say Evan Ingram. He doesn't always have the touchdowns, but just the actual production. If the touchdowns went his way, I think he would move up, honestly, into like tier 2 category.
Yeah.
Joe, do you agree with Evan Ingram?
I do agree.
All right. Evan Ingram moves up. Anybody else going to this half tier?
I'm putting David Njoku there. I'm worried about Deshaun Watson and overall, but I think dude's just a freak athlete. Showed out amazing the end of last year. I think he can really be good.
Yeah, hopefully Flacco showed Watson how to use him. Jameson, do you think Njoku should go up to 2.5?
I'm really struggling with David Njoku. When Deshaun Watson, the 5 games that they played, he averaged 4 catches for 35 yards. I mean, it's like plummeting. And I know you have to have athleticism at tight end. The guys like George Kittle, all the guys from Iowa like Laporta, and he's definitely got that. I've really struggled with Njoku. I'm going
to let you off on this one, buddy. I'm going to move him up.
All right. Thank you.
I listed him when we talked about tight ends on the all-out blitz. He was somebody I was avoiding in redraft only because of the Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
But he has more than a tier 3 guy, but maybe not as much as a tier 2. Like there are some concerns for me.
I hate to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but in Dynasty, I almost think he could be a sell high or a buy low.
Mm-hmm.
The sell high part, if you think that the Joe Flacco stuff last year, you can upgrade him, you can sell him. But at the same time, for me, I really do think there's an opportunity for Jameis Winston to play this year. Like just the wheels fall off for Deshaun Watson. And if that ends up, every time you see Jameis Winston, you just kind of close your eyes, kind of like Blake Bortles back in the day. The fantasy points will come like a minute left in the third quarter, and then Njoku gets his then. But it just, I like Njoku a lot. It's just really tough.
All right. So anybody else in this third tier?
What about Jake Ferguson is the name I would like to bring up. I don't know if I want to move him to tier 2.5, but
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
I get it. I think still 25 was awesome this year. the only other competition there is Luke Schoonmaker, who was significantly overdrafted.
Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I love Jalen Tolbert, but I don't think he's going to be the second option.
And we also know Dak Prescott likes tight ends.
Exactly.
So I'm okay with Ferguson moving up. Jameson?
Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, Joe.
So with the age, do we want to consider even moving him to tier 2? I don't think so, but I think we should. I think it's worth asking.
If I was teaching middle school, I would tell you that I like Jake Ferguson, but I don't like Jake Ferguson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think 2.5 is okay with him. I think he ends up being the second option behind CeeDee Lamb. And I do think there's a scenario, not that I'm wishing injury, but if something were to happen to CeeDee Lamb, I mean, I think the Cowboys could be in a world of hurt and, just ends up Jake Ferguson by default. He's not like a crazy athlete or nothing, but just the lack of weapons outside of that. You got Ezekiel Elliott for crying out loud. It just, I think he just kind of goes there by default just on volume.
Agreed.
All right, so let's look at the rest of tier 3 now. We have Goddard, Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Ben Sinnott, and Dalton Schultz. Anybody else we want to move up? By your silence, I'm assuming no.
If the Steelers had a quarterback, I would say Freiermuth, but I don't.
But they don't.
Exactly.
I think Freiermuth can end up having a really good year, but I don't think I can move him in the 2.5 tier.
I think Muth is a really sneaky redraft pickup, but I think dynasty-wise, he is where he is.
I always worry about Russell Wilson and tight ends, though.
That's very true.
I mean, I probably should have done a little more research before this, but who were his best tight ends in Seattle?
Will Dissly?
Yep. Parkinson.
Yep.
Colby Parkinson.
So I don't know if he doesn't support them. Maybe he didn't get the talent at that position.
He just can't throw over the middle of the field. So
yeah,
which Fields also can't do.
Although Kmet had a solid year last year.
Kmet was used a lot more as a slot guy though than an inline.
Okay.
So
all right. So are we okay then with Goddard, Freiermuth, Kmet, Sinnott, and Schultz being at least in tier 3, no higher?
Yeah.
No higher.
No higher. All right, gentlemen. Well, let's actually take this opportunity to have a word from our sponsors. So we are doing this live tonight, which should be a good reminder that there is nothing better than a live draft. Literally nothing is better. Get ahead of the game right now with Trophy Smack's gorgeous draft boards, complete with players' stickers so deep. Come on, guys. I can't get a so deep back. I'm going to set you up again. With player stickers so deep.
So deep. I raised my eyes. I was waiting for the...
Oh, Lord. You couldn't possibly need them all. I am disappointed in you all. And for the first time, Trophy Smack is offering an IDP expansion pack for all of us defensive degenerates. That's right. It's for the IDP and all of us. So no more scribbling names on blank stickers. Go to Trophy Smack and get the only draft board that meets all of your needs. So check out the link in the show notes and get yours today. All right, gentlemen, after that disappointing ad read, let's take a look at tier 4. And this is a much bigger tier, as happens in most of these drafts. We have, that's too hard to see on the screen. Let's zoom in a little bit. Sorry about that. We have Luke Musgrave, Michael Mayer, Tucker Kraft, Isaiah Likely, Jatavion Sanders, Cade Otton, Noah Fant, Chigo Okonkwo, Juwan Johnson, Greg Dulcich, and Hunter Henry. That's a bunch of players who I've heard of. Jameson, anybody in tier 3 going down to join them?
I almost want to say Cole Kmet. I know that he had a really good year last year, but just Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, he ends up the weapon number 4 as far as pass catchers go. And I just worry about that compared to the situation last year in Chicago with Justin Fields.
All right, so Cole Kmet possibly moving down. What do we think, Joe?
I'm with Jameson here. I think good player. I think it's going to be less good for fantasy now.
All right, so we have Cole Kmet taking that faithful journey down a tier. Oh, that hurts. That hurts.
Yeah.
Anybody else, Joe?
I want to bring up Ben Sinnott. Dude's getting a massive amount of hype right now, which makes sense because he went, 48? 48? Top, something like that in the draft, which makes sense. I think he's a damn good ball player, but he's more of an H-back than a true tight end. Also, there's the Jaden Daniels thing, which, I mean, if you've been watching, you know I've been super low on Daniels. He cannot throw over the middle of the field. It's very Jalen Hurts. And I really don't see a massive path to fantasy success for Sinnott in the near future. And Zach Ertz is there, which is annoying. I get why he's going as high as he is in a lot of drafts and rookie drafts, but I am a lot more tentative on him. And I think he's one of those guys who's going to be top 12 NFL tight end for a long time, but I don't know if he's a top 20 fantasy tight end because of the target limitations.
All right, Jameson, what do you think about Ben Sinnott?
I've really struggled with him as well. I just can't. I'm going to be honest. I can't really figure out Washington on offense, especially with Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels. I'm having a hard time kind of picturing how that actually works out. So that's been my problem. They got Terry McLaurin, who we talked about last week, a little older. Jahan Dotson, who is just a guy to me, but I don't feel comfortable with him in tier 3. I know we had the breakouts in tight ends last year, but I think people are kind of baking that into this year with him as well.
Well, gentlemen, I am very happy that you brought up Ben Sinnott. I have a lot of questions about him. I think he's a fantastic football player, but much like you said, Joe, he's a better football player than a producing tight end.
Yeah.
I think he is going to be used all over the field. I think of like Kyle Juszczyk out in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Somebody who can do a little bit of everything, which is great for his longevity and how long he's going to be in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how long he's going to be on a lot of redraft rosters if people are picking.
Checking real quick who I had my comp for as him. It was someone interesting like that. I think it was like a Harrison Bryant, maybe, which Harrison Bryant. So, which is that H-back sort of player
from LA Rams, or is he the Cleveland Browns?
The Cleveland Browns ones.
Okay.
He was a decent tight end just as far as fantasy goes. It just wasn't there. It's two totally different things.
Yeah.
All right. So tier 3 now, Goddard, Freiermuth, and Schultz. Are we happy with everybody else staying there?
I will bring up Dalton Schultz. I think he could end up kind of in the situation where Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins. I know he had 5 touchdowns. I believe he was tight end 12 last year. And he had decent production, but just adding more mouths to feed, I think he just kind of gets kicked out of the situation, kind of like Cole Kmet.
Okay. Joe, any questions about Schultz?
Questions, but I think I'm willing to leave him here. I think he's a lot more stable than a Cole Kmet, so I think he's really going to be a third down, move the chain sort of player. But I think he's very much similar to Goddard and Freiermuth, so I'm willing to keep him here.
Yeah.
All right.
I should say I think he stays here, but I could see he's like on the very end. He's on the last line of defense before falling off the cliff there.
Yeah, I think these 3 players are like you missed out on the top 12 tight ends. Is that in tiers 2.5 and up? I think these are the last guys you get. It's something like that.
15.
So these 3 are the bridge between you have a guy and you have an upside shot.
Okay. So then let's look at the guys who are in tier 4 currently, who we just went through. Can any of those guys move up to tier 3 in your estimation? Jameson?
I'm going to say Hunter Henry.
Thank you.
I really liked him. I think the situation last year with, McCorkle Jones and Bailey Zappi and just the nonsense that went on there, just how bad the offense was. It's kind of like having 4 cups of coffee in the morning and you're in the middle of nowhere, or nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and it just hits you all of a sudden. There's no bathroom. By the time you get there, you end up with a single ply TP that rips, and you got to end up just throwing your drawers in the garbage and just be done with it. I mean, it could not have been any worse in New England, but Alex Van Pelt ends up being the offensive coordinator. He does a lot of stuff with the tight ends, as we saw in Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski, and I think he ends up being a top 2 receiving option just behind the rookies there, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker in New England.
Joe?
I'm so happy you brought up Hunter Henry. I know when I said these are the last 3 for that last line defense, I realized that was a lie because it's 4, because Hunter Henry's in that list. Also the same third down chains mover, super steady. He had a lot of injuries as a Charger, but he's been pretty healthy with the Pats. And they gave him a pretty decent extension. I'm really content with Henry in tier 3, even though he is 29.
Yeah, not a sexy pick, but
no,
pretty steady. Pretty steady. Joe, anybody else in this tier?
I want to move Luke Musgrave up, but I think with Tucker Kraft and then the conversation we had with the Packers last week with all 17 wide receivers they have.
Yeah.
I think Luke Musgrave has legit tier 1 potential.
Really?
But I do. He was my tight end 2 in the class last year behind only Michael Mayer. I think he's fantastic. I love him, but right now there's so many mouths to feed. I don't think we can move him up. Michael Mayer is sorry, cut off Jameson, but
that's all right.
I think I still kind of want to put him in tier 3. Brock Bowers is a wide receiver. I really think now Luke Getsy's the offensive coordinator. He's not great, but I think the best case scenario for the Raiders would be to have Myers, Adams, Bowers, and Mayer on the field every play, or 75% of the plays, whatever. I think he's still a legit good player. Great. I think he'd be a great tight end.
Jameson, Michael Mayer?
I'm going to keep him in tier 4. I'm just very worried about him. I would not be surprised if they traded him, just because he wasn't part of, the Tom Telesco regime when he ended up coming over this year and picking up Brock Bowers. But out of Notre Dame, he was really productive. He was a really good tight end. That's why part of the reason the Brock Bowers pick, I don't want to say it didn't make sense, but it's just very frustrating because they already had the, B+ version of him in Michael Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
But I would keep him here because I'm worried about production, even with Brock Bowers in tier 2. I think a lot of people are excited about Samir White, and I think that can be a trap. I just think this whole offense is a trap, honestly.
Yeah, Devontae Adams is the only player on this offense I'm content with, and that's just Hall of Fame level talent.
Yep.
All right.
Michael Mayer is a massive buy low for me in Dynasty. I'm going to try to buy him everywhere, and just for the hope, the talent's real. And if he gets traded or Brock Bowers just ends up being a wide receiver, there's a chance.
Yep.
All right.
I will say real quick, going back to Luke Musgrave, if he gets the Jaden Reed touchdown upside that Jaden Reed got last year, I could totally see him end up in like tier 2. Tucker Kraft is injured. He'll be pretty borderline to start the season. But if you just play Russian roulette and if, say, touchdowns go to Musgrave in some weird fashion, I mean, he does have that upside. He's an awesome player. It's just kind of a shame that there's 400 mouths to feed in Green Bay.
Unless you're Jordan Love, and then that's a wonderful problem to have. Wonderful problem. So, Joe, anybody else in this tier? We have Likely, Sanders, Auden, Fant, Conquo. Anybody moving up?
I am not moving anybody up, but if there was a name to discuss, it is Isaiah Likely. Just the Mark Andrews of it. He's the tight end too, but when Andrews has been hurt, as he has been often, Likely's legit. And I believe he's a free agent after this year, and if he signs somewhere else, he could be a sneaky he's someone who I would consider putting in tier 3 for 2020 with the hope for 2025. Breaking
Okay.
up.
So any thought on Isaiah Likely being bumped up for the future, Jameson?
I kind of want to do it. 5 touchdowns the end of the year after Mark Andrews got hurt. I mean, he is a very good. I mean, I still don't like outside of Zay Flowers the rest of the wide receivers in Baltimore. I think that Likely and Andrews can both be used this year in some capacity. So I want to. I don't think it's responsible, but I like to live a little bit on the wild side. And just in case something happens, I think Likely would be a guy I'd like to move up.
I like to live dangerously.
Let's do it.
All right. Isaiah Likely is now in tier 3. Any of these remaining gentlemen moving up?
If he stays healthy, Greg Dulcich is going to be freaking awesome.
Do we think he's going to stay healthy, Jameson?
Possibly, and it's intriguing. I've struggled a little bit with him. I'm probably going to say to keep him here but I can see the path. Cortland Sutton, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded. I don't know if that's like a hot take, but I still think if they might trade him and they just don't have any weapons outside of Troy Franklin, Tim Patrick coming off the torn ACL. I just just really hard. Yeah, Marvin Mims. It's just really hard with this Broncos offense to move him to tier 3, but I can definitely see the path for him.
I also am not moving Dulcich up, to be clear. Just he's been too hurt, and Bo Nix, Jared Stidham, Zach Wilson are their quarterbacks.
Yep.
I'm not a Marvin Mims guy. I think he had a really good yards per route run, which is, I think, one of a telling stat, but his is super fake. His numbers are very fake. Troy Franklin is basically just a taller Marvin Mims. And then there's a real chance. Sean Payton loves to use the tight ends, but I think he's very comparable to Luke Musgrave. Just great athlete, and he needs to stay healthy.
All right, so Musgrave and Dulcich are 2 guys we're keeping an eye on in tier 4, but we're not quite ready to move them yet. So
also, Tucker Kraft is just Ben Sinnott, but in Green Bay. But
okay. So let's then take a look at tier 5. Tier 5 is Jelani Woods, Jonnu Smith, Gerald Everett, Taysom Hill, Dawson Knox, Tyler Higbee, Tyler Conklin, Mike Gesicki, Theo Johnson, Luke Schoonemacher, and Daniel Bellinger. Anybody from tier 4 moving down? Before we talk about who's leaving tier 5, let's say who's going to join tier 5. Joe, anybody?
Maybe.
I will nominate Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson, to me, is getting a little bit older. He hasn't quite broken out. 27. Okay. And now he's hurt with a foot injury, which I'm a little bit nervous about this year. I love him. I love the fact that he's a converted wide receiver from Penn State, right? Pennsylvania guy.
Tennessee. Is he Penn State?
He played at Penn State.
Okay. Oh, that's the Juwan Jennings is Tennessee.
So anybody else? Noah Fant, Kate Otten, we're all okay. Jatavian Sanders and that hotbed of offense in Carolina, we're good with here.
I think so. I'm not a huge Noah Fant guy. I know the fantasy community is, riling him up again.
The
I just
fantasy community.
That one. That's a good one.
I almost made it.
But I was going to say just real quick on Juwan Johnson. I think the bottom can really fall out on the Saints this year. The offensive line is probably going to be the worst in the NFL. Derek Carr stinks under pressure to begin with. He's already hurt. I think there's a lot that can go wrong. Alvin Kamara, I don't think is near as good as what maybe people think he still is at his age. I know you talked about him a little bit on the All Out Blitz, but he's just not my guy anymore. I used to love him, but I think there's a lot that can go wrong in New Orleans this year on offense.
Yeah, I'm fine moving Juwan down.
All right.
Other name I would bring up it's probably Tucker Kraft. Just similar to why we dropped Ben Sinnott, but then there's just more mouths to feed. But
I would agree
not,
about Tucker Kraft
and the injury. But
Move him.
move him. He's
swinging
gone.
the wrong way. He needs to go this way.
All right. Tucker Kraft is moved. I swear this is the year Chigakonkwo is going to break out. And if you play this pod from last year, I would have said the same thing, and the year before. But is this finally Chig's year?
I think Chig is going to be good this year. There reports are that he's actually going to play real tight end role this year and not just like a slot receiver, which will be good for him.
Okay.
But I don't think he'll ever be a massive upside player, but I think he's going to be good. I think you could turn into a Noah Fant, but who's solid.
I like Chig. I actually like the trajectory. Can't talk of the Titans offense. Yeah, and I like Chig too. You know, in college he was basically a receiving tight end, and hopefully they get back to more of that now that the offensive line is kind of sealed up. They get the new head coach from Cincinnati, who I think is going to be really good, and I just think there's a path to him, especially just a bunch of older guys there. Tyler Boyd, you know, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, I think there's a place for him. He probably stays in tier 4, but I think he's got some upside to him.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then looking at tier 5, this is a big tier, 13 players. Anybody moving up to tier 4? Joe?
Yes. You're welcome for this one, buddy. Tyler Conklin.
Hey.
Dude is rock freaking solid. He honestly, I will say we might. This is hard because his backup I adore, but if you told me Jeremy Ruckert was just going to get cut, I would say we could move him to tier 3. It's one where it's with tight ends, the 2-year outlook. I think with Aaron Rodgers, he can give you a tight end 12 season for the next 2 years. I think it's possible. I think he's really good. He's not sexy. He is
a great player. Hey,
flow, but
he is a little sexy. You
a little bit.
Watch your mouth, Jameson.
Hey,
what are you thinking about Conklin?
I'm going to be honest. Tyler Conklin, I think we all have him as just a guy who is in my blind spot. I don't really have a lean either which way. I just saw that he was tight end 22 last year. I never would have guessed that, but he's just some guy. I don't really have an opinion either way. If you guys want to do it, I'm fine with it, but I'm just not going to have any. There we go. That's the end of it.
Well, the judge has ruled he is going up to tier 4. I love Conklin. I love what he brings to the team. I also like Ruckert. We can talk about him in a minute.
We will.
But yeah, Tyler Conklin, this fits, right? They don't really have a second wide receiver. I mean, Mike Williams is there. Hopefully he stays healthy, but I'm not sure what version of Mike Williams we're going to get. I love Xavier Gibson. I think he's actually going to show out and be the wide receiver 2 this year. But not overall, just on the jet.
No. I know.
Okay.
Still well.
But yeah, I think Tyler Conklin's going to have a solid year with Aaron
87
Rodgers.
targets each of the last 3 years with 61, 58, and 61 catches, and then 600 yards each year. I think get him a couple touchdowns this year. Solid. Yeah,
a little bit of an upgrade in quarterback, even if Rodgers doesn't play. So
even if Rodgers plays left-handed, it's an upgrade.
It's a massive upgrade. All right, so Conklin moves up to tier 4. Who else in tier 5 moves over? Joe?
The Giants tight ends, I want to move one of them, but I could live with moving both. I think Daniel Bellinger is awesome. Theo Johnson, hey, Penn State freak athlete who didn't do anything because Penn State. I think one of them really does take the reins of the tight end job. I don't know which one. But
Jameson, do you have an opinion on either of these 2 players?
I would rather take the unknown and Theo Johnson just because I know Daniel Bellinger is tight end 1, but maybe it's just because of how bad they had Tommy DeVito and Daniel Jones and all those guys. The production's not there as far as fantasy goes. And I think I'd rather just take the shot on Theo Johnson.
All right. So I'm sort of stuck in the middle. So I have to choose which one we're moving up.
I will be okay moving both up, honestly.
I am not okay moving both up.
Okay.
I love Daniel Bellinger. I think he deserves to move to tier 4. But my worry about Theo Johnson, some of the stuff coming out of camp is exactly what we've thought about him in the process, is that amazing athlete, but is he a football player? I don't know how good he is at playing tight end. I know he can run. I know he can jump. I know he's strong. I just don't know if he's going to be able to put it all together on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might be one of those, like it used to be 3 years before tight ends broke out. I think he might be one of those. So I'm okay moving Bellinger up.
If we're moving one, I'm actually going to switch to Theo. He is also, like we talked about, he's a good blocker.
Traitor.
I am.
I don't even know what's happening.
And the unknown.
Yeah. Well, fine. Then we'll move them both up.
All right.
If you're going to be that way, Joe.
I'm sorry.
There's always one on every pod.
Put asterisks next to him, I guess.
It's
all right. Now I have to put 2 names in this one little spot on our show doc, but okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
Anybody else, Joe, you want to move up while I'm typing?
No.
Everybody else we're fine with here.
Can I make the case for Jonnu Smith?
Please do.
I was looking at his name.
Tight end 19 last year. We talked about how bad Arthur Smith was.
Mm-hmm.
You know who benefited from him? Jonnu Smith. Absolute gangster. He's on my list. The Dolphins paid him this year. Mike McDaniel's talked a lot about him. And just with all the pressure that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will bring to it, I think there's going to be some plays where Jonnu Smith, we saw last year, can break the long one. And he ends up benefiting that way. He's one of these late round, if you want to try to go for the late round tight end, just hope, one catches for the touchdown. I think he's the perfect candidate for it.
Well, one of the reasons the 3 of us happen to be in a dynasty league together. Thank you guys for joining. And we just did a 10-round veteran draft, which got ugly in a hurry. But one of the guys who I liked was Durham Smythe.
Mm-hmm.
Because he will randomly catch TDs in that offense. So I like Jonnu Smith moving up to tier 4 as a real tight end. I don't know how much play he's going to get, especially with all the weapons they do have. But we're talking about tier 4.
Yeah.
So are we okay moving Jonnu up to tier 4? Yes?
I am.
Yes, then he moves
finally
up.
Let's go.
It's one of those where if you're say your tight end 1 is Sam Laporta, and then you have Dallas Goedert who gets hurt again, then waivers come around. You just need someone. Jonnu Smith is going to be on waiver wires, even in dynasty leagues. Just throw him in there, and there's a chance he gets a 70-yard touchdown.
See, I disagree with Jonnu Smith. I don't think anybody in the Miami offense is going to be languishing in waiver wires.
Okay.
Because people are going to be excited about that offense.
That's fair.
And I think they'll grab pieces of it. I mean, in the most part, I would agree with you. Yeah. Listen, you can probably get him cheap.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Jelani Woods? I know we have 2 Anthony Richardson fans here.
I think that tight end room is so crowded. And I cannot believe that we are talking up Jelani Woods, that he is not saying he can't be, but they have Kylan Granson, who is a receiving tight end. They have Will Mallory. They have Mo Alley Cox, the guy that fantasy people loved for years. Yeah, you even forgot about it. I think and they had one more. I think it was Ogletree. He got arrested. I think one of these guys, I don't think Jelani Woods will get cut, but you're going to have to wait until August when they start cutting down the rosters just to see where you're going to play musical chairs at. And I just, we, as much as we love Anthony Richardson in fantasy, the greatest quarterback of all time, I just think it'll be hard for Jelani Woods to get there as far as fantasy goes.
Oh, if I've never been surprised by a pick and redraft, it was seeing you cry when Anthony Richardson went right ahead of you.
On Father's Day, I could not believe that.
Yeah, well.
And it wasn't even me who did it to you.
No, what a kick
or
in
me.
The balls.
I might have done it and just traded him away. Well, Anybody in this tier who should be booted
From tier 5?
from tier 5?
Tyler Higbee pretty easily, I think. I think everyone's forgetting that he blew his knee out in the playoffs, and then they signed a big money free agent.
Colby Parkinson.
Yeah.
All
And they
right,
have,
so
I
Higbee's
believe
gone?
it's Davis Allen back there as well. So, do we
Yeah.
need to have the Taysom Hill conversation?
I mean, Taysom Hill's not a tight end, but if he has tight end designation, he's going to score points. You just don't know when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
he
think
had
here's
more
fine.
carries than targets last year, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
He might have had
We'll
more
just-
pass attempts.
We'll just not deal with it tonight. How's that sound?
I think that's
Well-
reasonable.
I think he is somebody who can be sitting on your waiver wire,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a good pickup. Right? Like that first week, Juwan Johnson's still not coming back. His foot says
Yeah.
he's going to be out. He starts out on the PUP list. Throw Taysom Hill, and I mean, I don't know. He might get 8 carries and throw 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I'm surprised how old he is. I didn't know he was 33.
BYU
Oh, yeah, there you go.
mission trip.
There
but-
you go.
I mean, he
Anybody
was tight
else?
end- Looking at Taysom Hill, he was tight end 11 last year and points per game for the one league I'm looking at, but I don't think it's consistent enough. I don't want to deal with it.
All right, so we are turning our blind eye to him. What about Luke Schoonemacher? Are we leaving him in this tier? Does anybody
Oh.
care about Luke Schoonemacher?
I'd boot him.
Joe?
I would keep him here solely for the reason that maybe Jake Ferguson is Dalton Schultz and Luke Schoonmaker is Jake Ferguson.
Very good. Schoonemaker stays.
Yeah.
So right
Just
now,
they keep Dak.
is there anybody who we haven't mentioned? All right, now we're best of the rest. Anybody we haven't mentioned who should be brought into tier 5? Joe, you seem to be itching.
I have 8 names that I wanted to bring up, but specifically for tier 5, let's start with, we already mentioned him, Jeremy Ruckert for the Jets.
Okay.
Loved him as a prospect. Think he's a great pure all around tight end. I think he's basically Tyler Conklin, but a better athlete. So with how we felt about Conklin, if Conklin gets hurt or just regresses because he's 28, 29, then I think Ruckert could really step in and I think he could be a sneaky tight end 1 play this year. Aaron Rodgers has always loved his tight ends. So if Ruckert, not overall tight end 1, just to clarify, but if Conklin goes out early, I think Ruckert could he's a nasty blocker, good enough. I think there's a chance.
All right. I'm okay with Ruckert going to tier 5. Jameson, anybody you want to talk about?
The
Oh.
30-year breakout, and he's still 23, so he's young.
I think a couple people. I want to start off with Colby Parkinson. The
Mhm.
Rams gave him a big deal, even if it's short term with Tyler Higbee out. I mean, love what McVay does. You get Matthew Stafford on the play action. He hits him right over the middle. I think he could be, and I mean, they gave him some serious money for somebody who's just basically filling in for Tyler Higbee. I thought Davis Allen was going to be the guy until they signed Parkinson, but I think he deserves some recognition there.
I totally agree. Parkinson, he gets a lot of rep as a blocking tight end, which he's not. He's a good receiving tight end. It's just the Shane Waldron offense is weird.
Yeah.
I think you could bump him to tier 4. But I'm also
Can't go
not
that
expecting
far.
Higbee. Yeah, I'm also not expecting Higbee to come back at all.
I got you. Makes
So-
sense.
I'm okay with Parkinson where he is. Jameson, do you want to move him to tier 4?
We can leave him there for now.
Okay.
I think we do need to talk about just the Chargers tight ends. Gerald Everett, or not Gerald Everett, but he's gone. Donald Parham. They brought in Hayden Hurst. Just the lack of weapons, and one of those guys ends up benefiting from it.
Joe, any of those guys stand out to you? Hayden Hurst, Donald Parham, the giant out of Stetson?
Yeah, maybe Hurst can be a waiver wire fill-in. I've lived the Parham dream for a long time, and it's always let me down, so I'm kind of over it.
Yeah, he's been a long-standing tight end obsession. A lot of those guys have gone through my roster, so I'm okay leaving those two guys in tier 6 if we're creating a tier 6. Anybody else?
I'm looking through the list. The only Zach Ertz. I mean, I don't love it at all, but he seems like he's going to play. Has some experience with Cliff Kingsbury, so I just don't. Just somebody you want to talk about, I guess.
I would put Zach Ertz on there. I don't
Good
think
call.
he has a long career left, but he has that Wiley old tight end skill that's very hard to find. Somebody who can always find a little hole in the end zone to get open.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of a Wiley skill set, Jared Wiley now for the Chiefs. I was so happy when you used that word. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but good work.
Sure it was.
Yes. I know, Jameson, we've been high on him, and I thought he was an awesome prospect. Older, yeah, but big, fast, great with the ball in his hands. If there was a prototype player to be the Travis Kelce heir, not saying he's going to be that level of player, he's not. It's Jared Wiley. Like, I think he can be really freaking good. He's already seemingly overtaken the tight end 2 role. I think he could be really good. Like, really freaking good.
Well, somebody's going to have to take over for Kelce eventually. I'm willing to put him in tier 5.
They're lacking so much size on the team. Rashee Rice is a fine size receiver, but he's a gadget player. What's his name? Xavier Worthy. We know what he is.
Hollywood Brown.
Yeah. It's like even on their depth chart, you have Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney. It's like it's all smaller guys. They need someone big for the future.
Okay. All right.
I was going to just bring up probably not a tier 5 play, but he goes in the Jared Wiley kind of realm. I think Eric All, once he gets healthy with his ACL for Cincinnati, I think he could end up being like the George Kittle in that offense. Somebody
Absolutely.
who might not be every week, but when he hits like crack cocaine, just unbelievable. And just not that I would have an experience, but just from what I heard.
How exactly does it hit?
Like crack. Huh?
Okay. Like Eric All. I heard somebody who said that the other day. They were like, wow, this crack hits like Eric All.
That's what Dave Chappelle said anyways. So, but I just think, if you have some patience with these rookies, I think they can end up having a pretty prominent role and end up being fantasy viable.
All right. Well, gentlemen. One more name.
Sorry.
All right.
Cade Stover for the Texans.
Okay.
Played with CJ Stroud.
Yep.
Yeah, in Ohio State. They had really good chemistry. He's not a great blocker, but he's a nasty player. Started as a defensive end, linebacker, moved over a couple of years ago. Sweet hands. I think he's really could just be another Dalton Schultz. And when Schultz moves on after he has a 2-year deal, I think Schultz, give him a little bit of time. I think there's a chance he's just a security blanket. Nothing sexy, maybe, but name to bring up.
All right. Cade Stover. All right, gentlemen. Well, it might be hard to not to think this, but we're not just a bunch of pretty faces here at IDP Plus. We have an entire suite of tools and rankings for both offense and defense, plus rookie rankings, injury trackers, snap tools, articles, and more. So right now, get your first month for just $1 with the promo code MOCKDRAFT. Head over to idpguys.org after the show to get ahead of your lazy league mates and start your march towards fantasy football greatness today. The promo code MOCKDRAFT. The link and details are in the show description. Gentlemen, it is now time for tags where we can share any final thoughts and let everyone know where they can find us. Jameson?
I'm over on the Twitter machine at Jameson Rules. A special shout out to Casey Kasem. I got in my Sunday Dreamers Club
nice
shirt. So I just want to give a special shout out. Check them out. Very comfortable as hell. Let me say that.
Nice.
So, but like I said, just over on the Twitter machine at Jameson Rules, gambling, football, wrestling, all that good stuff.
All right. Well, if we're going to plug Casey Kasem, Joe, you go ahead. I'll be right back.
Okay. You can find me on the Twitter machine at Jolo63, talking about some football stuff, Orioles, who just kicked the crap out of the Yankees. Go Birds. Shameless plug. Let me have something, guys. And yeah, a little slow on the writing right now, but overall, that's where you can find me.
Was that perfect timing?
Good timing.
All right. Well, plugging Casey Kasem. I got mine.
There we go.
I want to pet all the dogs and play all the fantasy football. I'm at JJ Wenner on Twitter. Thank you to everybody who joined on tonight's stream. Thank you to Joe and Jameson for your work on this episode. Thank you to everybody over at IDP Plus, Axton, Brittany, Gary, Nate, Ricky, for all their help producing the pod. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday to the All Out Blitz with Doug, Orth, and myself, where we welcome a special guest. That's a teaser. Then come back on Friday for the Rod Pod, where we dive into some IDP tiers. So from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends, boat drinks.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.